So I think Caroline has stepped in while you were giving the update on Rubic, collaborating with them with their new SDK. So I suppose to give just a very brief overview on that one. So obviously, Rubic have developed a cross-chain exchange, essentially, rather a cross-chain aggregator. And this allows people to, say, pick up Dogira on either the Ethereum chain or the Polygon chain. They'll be able to use assets that they have either on the Polygon or Ethereum chain or any other chain that they support and be able to pick that up. In particular, if we were to say at any point decide that we needed to expand onto another chain or anything like that, Rubic is really the perfect kind of partner that we can work with on that stuff. It's a tried and battle tested system, which we've been in conversation with Rubic for some time now and giving them feedback on their SDK that they've put together for it. They've had a widget available to do it previously, and the SDK obviously allows it to be just a lot more integrated into any platform it's on. So say, for example, on Dogira.finance, right now, if you want to pick up any tokens on there, you have to, click through, trade through CEX or DEX, stuff like that. You have to connect onto it. With the Rubic SDK, we can pretty much just put a widget on a page and that will aggregate through all of the DEXs that we're on board with. And say if you're on Ethereum, it's a very quick way for it to say, look, if you only have tokens on the Ethereum network, we obviously have much less liquidity. I think we've only about 2% of our liquidity over there. It can allow you to, say, use your Ethereum on the Ethereum network to pick up Dogira tokens on Polygon. So really, really good system. And it's obviously one of the utility-focused tokens that we're always really happy to reach out with and collaborate with. So yeah, fantastic to be coming on board with that. And Caroline, I'm not sure if you mentioned other partners that we may potentially be working with over the near future.
Yeah, so I just briefly mentioned our confirmed ones, Hanzo and Polydoge, as well as Rubic.
Perfect. Awesome. So yeah, that is the update on general partners, and we'll have more news on that in the very near future. Outside of that, then, I suppose big question on everybody's minds is, updates on Gooeys. We are still working on it. And as we noted beforehand, like our main priority right now is on the actual contract layer, on the logic itself. When it comes to the play to earn game, it will be functional, but for the client itself, we can consider it to be essentially in like an alpha or a beta state. Now, it will be on mainnet because it will be functional, but it certainly won't be up to, I suppose, the graphical or aesthetical quality that we would aim for in a final build. But this is something that we're kind of eager to work with the community on, see what kind of works for them, and be experimental with some of the gameplay that we plan coming out from it. We've already noted what the core features will be, that, there'll be Gooey breeding or tumbling, as we've begun to call it. There will be the quest system, which would be a lot like, I suppose you call it a lot like Fallout Shelter, where you can just send them off, come back, pick up your assorted loot from it. There'll be the standard feeding, taking care of them, stuff like that. You'll be able to lease them out. But there's a whole lot more that we're going to be working on after the actual point of launch. And this is all stuff we want to work closely with the community on. The smart contract that we're putting out for Gooeys itself is basically just containing the base game logic, the stuff that we need in there. Stuff like, it has breeding, it has the ability to feed Gooeys, it has the ability to go off on quests, it has the ability to rent or loan or give a Gooey out to somebody. That is just the base version of the game. And obviously the graphical interface we'll be putting around that, you can assume for all intents and purposes that the first version of it will essentially be, an alpha client running on, I suppose, the production mainnet code. But graphically, we'll be making a lot of changes kind of as time goes on. Right now, we're just very focused on working with the actual logic on it, looking down at kind of everything we have set up to roll out, on the future with it, and working directly with the community and seeing, like, how do things feel at the moment? What kind of changes can we make moving forward? And obviously, we already have a DAO token, which has seen a lot of use in Dogira. So as we've noted before, every project that we launch will have ties back to the Dogira token, along with the actual token staking itself, as in being able to stake in some Dogira and get some Gooey tokens back in return for it. You'll also be able to use your Dogira token to take part in any DAO votes that happen around that too. So we're keeping the ecosystems closely tied together on that one. And there are other use cases which we are discussing internally to see what more can we do with Dogira without actually, greatly affecting any in-game balance. As in, keep the ecosystem able to survive on its own side, but give Dogira use in it at the same time without causing any imbalances, stuff like that. And I think those are the major updates that we have for you right now. We'll be releasing more content and information on Gooeys just before the launch as well. And we'll have our public mint is starting in 10 days. Or sorry, not the public mint, the private mint is starting in 10 days, I believe. And I think it's 14 days until we have the public mint then. So yeah, absolutely look out for that. It's things are hopefully going to get a little bit more exciting in a time that's been, let's be blunt, a little bit boring for the market. But well, nobody can nobody can really change how the market has been for the last while. But rest assured, development has continued uninterrupted on everything that we're building. Be the market up or down, we're still working in the background. And I think that's all the major updates. And now we can jump on to the Q&A portion.
Perfect. Thank you for doing all that breakdown for us, Owen. So the first question we have here is, I think I heard something about Gooeys dying at the Gooeys Reveal AMA. Is that a feature that's been determined? Is it actually going to be in the game? What were your original intentions with mentioning that?
Yeah, so I actually did mention to the team that we can have the Gooeys die, and it'll add a bit of scarcity to it, and it'll make people think twice before sending them off on quests that they are clearly way too weak for. And I was massively vetoed, which I can understand. The reality is that there's going to be some level of personal connection that people would have with their Gooeys. We can kind of get that, particularly with the wonderful artwork that Mary has been putting together for it as well. No, we're not putting actual deaths in there for Gooeys, at least not in the bare bones build of it. There are other systems we've looked at, in the future that it may be possible with, far more kind of, I suppose, risky endeavors that you could take. But generally, we don't really want to see Gooeys. We don't want to see them die. That's essentially it. Like, if you think about, say, any Tamagotchi you might have had as a kid, or even a Chow Garden, Sonic Adventure and stuff like that, it was never nice to even see your Tamagotchi or Chow get hurt, let alone deal with it when they actually died. So I think right now I can respect the team's wishes on that one, that we have different systems in place to, I suppose, disincentivize taking on quests that would be, difficult for your Gooey at whatever level they're at. But that can easily be done with, say, fatigue or cooldown, stuff like that. If there's a 40% chance that you may fail on a mission that you send out or a quest that you send your Gooey out on, it shouldn't really be a 40% chance to die. Now, yes, we could do it, 40% chance of failure, 2% chance of death, stuff like that. But I think really with crypto and in everything in kind of blockchain and P2E gaming and stuff like that, you need to allow people to be able to take risks without having them lose everything at the end of it. I mean, it's kind of unfair on people who would say, they might pick up a Gooey or get one on, particularly if they get one on loan. You definitely don't want something dying if you give it out on loan. But, they pick up their first Gooey and they're just, slowly building up in it. And they do a quest that, has a 98% chance of success. And lo and behold, they roll a 2% fail rate. Tragic as it is, but I mean, anybody who's played XCOM can tell you that 95% does not mean 100%. You will get hurt with those 5% of misses, which can feel like 20% of misses at times. So yeah, when looking at stuff like that, we don't want to essentially lock somebody out of the game because they just had a really bad roll. And considering like this might be a Gooey that they've, they might be kind of a little bit bonded to it at that stage. If you're raising essentially your virtual pet and you have them for, a couple of months or even a year or two, I can't imagine many people would be very happy to see those cute little things die on them. So I think the team did come to a pretty good consensus on that one, but it's something we'll look at with maybe some future kind of add-ons if we, if we make an expansion where, I don't know, we have an Age of Empires style system, maybe then, but right now, no, there's no plans to put in anything that would allow your Gooeys to permanently die.
Oh, what a relief. We don't want to make the Dark Souls of P2E gaming, do we?
No, if we do, we maybe do something with a little less cute. I just think when you get one of those NFTs, you will not feel good if anything happens to them. So
yeah, we don't want that. But so we've talked a little bit about a token to go along with Gooeys. Now this question is, will there be a token release at some point for Gooeys, or will the NFTs be the only source of P2E revenue? How do like token rewards work? Is that something you're able to talk about yet?
Yeah, so we can start talking about that one now. So yes, there will be a token that is released with Gooeys. So once the public game goes out live, the token will also go live on that day. So you can assume April the 1st for that token to go out live. The token will be earnable in-game. Any quests that you go on will have a chance to return them back. And once we expand on in-game systems, we may be looking at making that part of, an in-game shop where you don't have to directly spend, say, Matic on OpenSea or anything like that. But right now, the main part of it is for, in-game goods, as in getting some food for your Gooey or, paying for any costs that are associated with breeding, stuff like that. And, other small little things you might look at, say, if they have a fatigue timer from doing a quest that was maybe way too hard for them that you took a chance on. If you want to get them back a little bit quicker into action, send them out in another quest, that's, of course, something that we could do with the in-game token. That token is designed to be inflationary. So one of the reasons, again, why we don't have Dogira as the main token in it, number one, Dogira is not inflationary, it is deflationary. There would be no way to actually, I suppose, safely control the game logic if we had Dogira as the main token in it. As I said, there are use cases for Dogira already, particularly in staking and DAO votes, and we're going to look at a few more things we might be able to do, maybe, well, obviously not set in stone here, but maybe a couple of cosmetics, stuff like that, some rewards for being able to hold it or being in verified holders, etc. But all of the in-game stuff, the economy that we're going to be setting up in that will be using the token that we'll be launching alongside Gooeys. And again, one of the main reasons for that is we need an inflationary token, and we do not want Dogira to be inflationary. It's a very different thing. I mean, if you look at any of the kind of platforms that are launched with inflationary tokens right now, the ones that do a coverall on it, particularly, say, staking tokens that are inflationary, like Cake, it's very difficult for them to be able to keep up with the rates of inflation compared to the rate of usage. Now, our Gooeys token is quite lucky in the fact that, we're developing an ecosystem for it, which is great. But with Dogira, I mean, the ecosystem for that one is designed to be, I suppose, by reason, a lot more kind of safe. And granted, yes, we're talking in terms of crypto tokens and stuff like that. And safe might have a different meaning to, say, gold or silver. But when it comes to the actual tokenomics of it, Dogira can never have more tokens minted. And I think that's the kind of stuff that we want to keep. That's the way we want to keep it. When we have additional games that are launching, they might have their own tokens as well, rather than, sharing one token across multiple platforms, which we've spoken about in our white paper. It's just it's a design nightmare, particularly for, game design. You might be able to work it in with economic design, but you're always going to be sacrificing a little bit on the game design side of it. So yeah, that is the overview of the token that will be launching with Gooeys. We'll have more information on that as we come up to the launch, but you can assume that this will be the main token that is used in-game.
Great. In terms of, gosh, where did I put that question? So in terms of the actual P2E elements for Gooeys, how do you imagine people interacting with the earning aspect, right? Is it going to be something where they can earn pretty rapidly, or is it more of a passive earning? What's your vision for that?
Yeah, so a lot of it will come down to, I suppose, player choice. At the start of the actual play to earn launch, like we said, one of the only kind of main things in it will be the Fallout Shelter style quests that you'll be able to send your Gooeys off on, which is essentially a more idle kind of way of playing, that you'll be able to send them out on a quest, wait X amount of time. That quest will have certain odds associated with it, and your Gooey stats will be able to be used to offset against those. So if you have a particularly strong Gooey, they'll have a higher chance of success, etc., etc. I suppose for the main rollout of it, player choice does come into it, and how much risk you want to take with it. But typically, we often see with games that are play to earn games that are launched that they tend to be hyperinflationary. Now, it's something that we have to look at quite carefully and make sure that the inflow of tokens is not so high that it's stripping the outflow of them. We have to be able to make up for it. There has to be a token sink that actually goes into it. Now, we see long term that yes, it will likely, it will nearly definitely have more inflationary uses than it will have deflationary takeaways from it. But similarly, it is simply the way game design works in that kind of sense. You just have to manage the level of inflation to a point where it can be, I suppose, controlled and understood by the general player base without having any nasty surprises. And, you pick it up and all of a sudden the supply is, it has 10x in an hour, stuff like that. So we certainly don't want any cases like that to be in there. But as quick as you can earn tokens, a lot of that, albeit yes, it'll be limited to the point where we don't want 10x in an hour or anything like that in terms of supply. But you will be able to determine yourself based on general risk reward on going on your P2E journey of exactly what kind of level you want to take on with that. I mean, you might have multiple Gooeys and you might decide, it's much safer to just send them all out on quests that they have, a 95 to 100% success rate in. Or again, you might be a risk taker and say, yeah, I'm going to send my Gooey out on a quest that only has a 50% success ratio. And that one Gooey at 50% success ratio might make more than 4 that are doing at 100% success ratios. So yeah, there'll be a level of player choice in all of that. And with the new features we're going to roll out over time, we'll be obviously expanding on that way more. Like we've looked at stuff, obviously one of the big things in GameFi is to be able to stake in game and stuff like that, to be able to lock up your tokens in the game environment or even create LP in the game environment, lock it up, stuff like that. These are all features that we're looking at for after the base version is launched. But again, we'll be working with the community on how things feel, doing DAO votes on it, seeing what people are interested in. But yeah, I suppose there's no one cover-all answer I can give on that one. But generally, we will be paying attention to the downsides of a high level of inflation and be acting against that as much as we can. And similarly, we will also be working with player choice in mind, in that there will be risk reward ratios that you can take on, which will determine the amount of tokens that may get injected into the ecosystem.
Yeah, so I think on that, a lot of people have been asking about if we're ready to talk about the mint price for Gooeys.
Yeah, I think we are at this point. So we've been throwing around between 100 and 150 Matic for a while now. As the market took a kind of downturn recently, we were looking towards, putting it on the higher end of going to 150 Matic. Now, similarly, with the market taking a downturn, we also understand that a couple of people, they would have taken losses at the same time as well. So we're going to cut back a little bit from it, and we're going to run in at 125 Matic on it. So that is going to be the mint price for Gooeys on day one.
That is excellent news. I think that falls in line with some of the other NFT mints that we've seen on Polygon. So I think that's a pretty accessible price for a lot of people.
And like keeping in mind that these are kind of like the day one versions of it, and essentially like there's going to be abilities to be able to loan out things as well. There's also going to be, over time, as I've said before, Gooeys will naturally go upwards in stats overall in the ecosystem as new Gooeys are born. So old Gooeys, we're looking at that being, for the price going up along NFTs or anything like that, we want to see the older ones slowly come down in price over time so that people are able to get in on a little bit of a cheaper rung on it. And also then for people who want to jump in at a higher level of it, there'll be a continual inflow of Gooeys that have essentially higher stats as time goes on. So there'll always be an entry point that is getting more accessible on the lower end of it, while also maintaining, the higher stat and, rarer Gooeys up at the kind of top rung on it. So it kind of covers a lot of play styles on that one. I think 125 Matic puts us in a good starting point for it.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the case. In terms of, you've said basically that the first iteration of Gooeys that we're putting out in April is going to be an alpha or beta. How do you imagine the update schedule to kind of look? I mean, obviously that's hard to like ironclad put out because dev time, and it might take longer to build certain new features or new UI, whatever. But like, what do you imagine in terms of the update cycle?
Yeah, certainly. It's a very valid and fair question. I think when it comes to games, you do have to have a decent level of commitment on it, where you're able to give decent notice in advance when things will be coming out on it. Now, if you were to look at, say, Splitter Steel, which I released, I mean, that went up with the intention of maybe one update a month, and it would be minor. And it turned into, I think we went at like one major update a month, and we had like 3 minor updates in the same month as well, running at the same time. A lot of it comes down to community feedback. Like with Splitter Steel, a lot of it came down to that I wanted to kind of look at much more experimental features to add into the game, basically to take the game away from the base of it, which I felt was, typically kind of shallow. But the feedback from the community said that it is obviously, they agree it's a shallow game, but it's why they're kind of playing it. It's a game that they're actually enjoying, and it's more the social aspect that they get a kick out of. They want to see more stuff around the actual social aspect of it, which, led to the creation of the in-game organizations. It led to the creation of the in-game base and HQ to get more kind of collectathon stuff going. A lot of it, I think, will come down to community level feedback on what kind of stuff that they will find important to actually get added in there. I mean, if we do find that, the community is starting to take off with this, and we're seeing a lot of people, interacting in the Telegram groups on Discord, and the DAO comes in saying we'd love more community features. Now, that's what we build, and that's what the build times are going to kind of come down to. Now, there are a couple of major features which we have discussed internally, which we'll be building as time goes on. And I think all this stuff would do well to kind of sit on a roadmap. Like, this is one of the titles that, I've said before, as far as the roadmap on Dogira.net goes, we were often way too much in flux to be able to provide a roadmap and be able to stick to it. So we could put one up, but it was so likely that things would not fall into place on it. And in the long term, it would just kind of leave people with a bad taste in their mouth. That's why we opted to, get rid of the roadmap that we had on there entirely and instead give updates through our AMAs. But when it comes to actual, game development and stuff like that, and knowing that there are going to be additional features added to it, features that we have already got planned out, that is something we'll certainly be able to give roadmaps on and make way more public the actual updates we'll be doing on it. So, yeah, I would say stay tuned for kind of more direct dates on it, because certain features will take longer, other features will take shorter, some features may need to get an external audit, some may not, etc., etc. But yeah, we'll have a roadmap up for all of that stuff once we kind of get Gooeys up and running. And I suppose we obviously spend the first couple of days or weeks kind of, sprucing up the front end client a little bit, adding in small little fixes here and there. And then we'll be able to kind of rock out with the more full development plan on what we have ready to go forward, and the dates we kind of agree on that as well.
Well said, well said. I have a couple of small questions here that I think we can knock out before we roll into some more general DeFi market stuff. Will there be a limit on how many Gooeys a person can own?
There will not be a hard limit on it. Now, when we're minting at launch, in the private pre-sale, that will be a limit of 1 Gooey per person. When it comes on to the actual public sale, then we have said before, we're going to be doing, it'll be unlimited following that. But I think for the original 1,000 that we'll be minting, we may put a cap on of, say, 2 or 3, just to make sure that somebody doesn't run in and buy 500 on one account or anything like that. So you can kind of assume that up until the public mint, it'll be 1 per person. And beyond that, then we may look at just, keeping it to 2 or 3 per person as it goes on for the public mint phase. But after that, then there will be no hard limit that's actually placed on it.
Yeah, I think that's a very safe thing to do, especially with the limited supply. We don't want to see any, massive whales come in and basically control the economy right out the gate. In terms of the Gooeys token, what are we going to be doing with the liquidity for that? I don't know if we want to talk about that, but I did see a question about where that would come from.
Yeah, so we'll have liquidity placed onto QuickSwap. That's going to be the first one that we launch it on. I'm assuming we're looking at the question is also kind of pondering, where's the other side of the liquidity coming from, the Matic side. So obviously the sales that we have from the actual NFT mint will go towards that in portion. And from that there, we will also have liquidity incentives available on Dogira.finance, where you'll be able to stake in and provide liquidity. So ideally, the healthiest projects you'll ever see are the ones that are run by community liquidity. Now, Dogira is not at a stage where it can do full community liquidity yet. Obviously, I think we've got about 800,000 in liquidity at the moment, which is allocated, or rather the tokens are held by the Dogira deployer wallet. And now you might correct me on that one. I haven't checked it in a while. I know obviously the market's been a bit shaky, but ideally in the future, if Dogira is to go up to much higher price points or anything like that, we'd love to see that being community liquidity. That's why we incentivize it already. So we already incentivize liquidity at the level we're at, but we're going to be obviously hoping that as time goes on, we'll be able to increase those incentives on it and make sure that liquidity on the community side is constantly growing. And obviously, just in case there's any kind of fear from that one, as no, we're not looking to, completely pull liquidity or anything like that the minute we see a certain number. But it's something we're always going to be doing will be community incentivized liquidity, where, we'll have the Dogira portion in there. I think right now we account for about 75% of the liquidity on the Dogira team holding in the Dogira wallet, and about 25 is community owned, which is honestly fantastic. And we'd love to see that grow over time. So yeah, pretty much what we've done with Dogira, we provide the initial liquidity. We will have the income, a portion of it anyway, that we'll be able to take out from the minting process, and then we'll be able to provide incentivized liquidity options as well on Dogira.finance. So yeah, everything kind of comes in on that one. We do not have numbers to give out just yet on what ratio of liquidity we'd be providing against tokens and stuff like that. But this will obviously be revealed before the token itself goes live.
Yeah, thank you for kind of elaborating on that a little bit. We're going to switch gears now off Gooeys. We have a question here about the Polygon snafus for the past couple weeks. Have the recent issues surrounding Polygon as a chain influenced the team's decision to look at other chains or building a running like side chain for our games?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I mean, I've always had Polygon's back, and I still do have their back. They're developing a very complex system, and they're running at a 2-second block time, one of the fastest that we've seen, in all EVMs that are out there at the moment. Even on the ones that have a higher throughput, as in a higher TPS on them, they don't manage to hit that block time. And that's been one of the reasons why I've always been very supportive of Polygon, that they've really focused on the tech that's behind it, and also the amount of work that they've done in kind of making it, I suppose, as green as you can get right now when it comes to blockchain. And as green as it can get is actually quite green under Polygon. And they are still working on that and bringing down the actual, carbon output and the electricity usage that they will see on a yearly basis, which I love. But yes, it is also fair to state that there have been a couple of issues on it as well. One issue that kind of Polygon struggled with for a while, and we even mentioned this in our white paper, was a lack of available RPCs that were able to handle the traffic that was coming in. And that was, our Polygon RPC kicked off as a community-run aggregator service, which is great. You love to see the community being able to sort out these problems. Similarly, I've held complaints as well, though, that when it's something as important as an RPC service, that's something I would love to see a little bit more resources go into from the more official side of it. But to be fair to the community, it has been fantastic, and Ensura have private RPCs available as well for those who are willing to kind of pay for access, I guess. Which on a developer side, that's absolutely no problem. I'm more than happy to do it, but you don't want that for general users. Like you don't want to look at the internet as being something that people pay their telephone provider or broadband provider, and then they have to pay a general internet fee, stuff like that. So yeah, the aggregator service is working brilliant, but that's something I think that I would love to see further improved on in the future. And obviously the main question being asked here, I assume, is to the unexpected downtime that happened across Polygon and kind of kept it down for much longer than we expected. I believe most systems are back up and operational at the moment. I've seen a couple of Twitter posts that have complained that they're still having minor issues. Now, I haven't had them myself, but again, I'm running through a private RPC and that could be shielding me from it. But yeah, it is. That's kind of two sides. But number one is that yes, you would prefer if this never happened. Number two is that every chain has had this happen. Ethereum has had this happen. Solana, I think, has been down for God knows how long over the past couple of months. I remember I was on Phantom earlier in the year testing that out, and I realized that they had a variable block speed on it. And so it was good for, scalability, that if they were having a lot of blocks coming in or a lot of transactions coming in, they would ramp up the block speed, or rather ramp down the block speed. So they could go up to, I believe it was about 20 seconds per block. And that would, keep the network running smooth, stable, secure. But it was 20 seconds a block. It's slower than Ethereum. It's slower than Bitcoin. It's just not acceptable at that stage. Sorry, not slower than Bitcoin, but you get the point that I'm making on it. It's just very slow.
Right.
So, yeah, I think like that was one of the main reasons that I kind of looked at it. And then I noticed the fees that I was paying when the network was that busy, which I think I was paying about $3 per transfer, which, you know, is a lot lower than Ethereum, a lot higher than Polygon. So that kind of ruled that out for me. I'll be honest on Solana. So Solana runs on it's a very different network. Like Rust is the main language that's used on there now. Granted, it's kind of like, you know, everybody just in blockchain right now, the years of experience are on the low end for everyone, as they're all quite new. Rust, on the other hand, has been out for quite a while now. But similarly, if you look at stuff like, say, Cardano, which is on Haskell, I legitimately would not use it. And I'm sure there are plenty of people on here who would scold me for saying such a thing. But I mean, I liked Haskell when I was doing my university course, getting my degree. I do not like the idea of managing a financial asset with Haskell. It's just plain and simple. EVM, I think, is one of the biggest selling points that we're seeing on a lot of the L1s at the moment. Now, I will say out loud that I do quite like Solana, and I think that if we're looking at the next 4 to 5 years of market movements and stuff like that, Solana is likely going to be one of the tokens that will still be around at the end of it all. That it has, in my opinion, probably got a very, very decent life ahead of it. And I think that that's going to increase in time as more projects are coming on board. Avalanche, I think, it's probably one of the better networks we've seen come out in quite a while. And they do a lot where Solana kind of fell down. Like, one of my big issues with Solana is how centralized it is. And a lot of that comes down to how expensive it is to set up your own node to become a validator. And I think at last check that I did that on, now granted, I think Solana was at about $150, maybe more at that stage. But it came in at about $100,000 when I was looking at it at that stage. Or somebody might correct me on that. But I've seen many of the same complaints made by other people as well, just kind of pointing out the amount it would cost on that network to set up a validator node, which inherently makes it a lot more centralized. So there's kind of concerns I have around that one, but it's something I'm definitely going to keep looking at. Avalanche, like I was saying, it's a really strong network, and it's something that I'm still looking at. And lastly, then, I suppose, when we're talking about other kind of networks that may not have the level of popularity of the others, one additional up at the high levels right now, which a lot of people are talking about, is Luna. So I have looked at that one. It's the 6-second block time and the relatively high transaction cost that's kind of worrying me on it. So Luna is a gasless network. You can't front run on it, which, you know, I think this is a good thing for consumers and traders who are new getting into blockchain, because gas is often one of the areas where people fall down a little bit. It's confusing. You know, what is Gooey and why do I have to pay this much? We've seen it ourselves. Recently, we saw that, you know, we put out a massive update on Dogira Finance. And one of the major parts of the update was that it defines your Gooey for you. As people were, you know, running with the default settings of MetaMask, which, to be fair, I would expect a lot of people to do. And it was bringing back a result for them from the RPC, which was only like 1 Gooey or something like that. And 30 Gooey is the minimum that you need to run across Polygon. So people were putting it through on 1 or 2 Gooey, their transaction was getting stuck, and we had to teach them how to unstuck a transaction, how to overwrite it, how to, you know, define Gooey to put in for it. And it's great for the community members who took the time out to, you know, sit in our Telegram and ask for information on that, get help with it. But it's really not a good use case for people who are finding Dogira Finance on day one, wanting to stake some tokens. They've never used Gooey before. They don't know what gas is. And, you know, they just get their transaction stuck. They're not going to consider that this might be a larger issue. They're just going to think it's broken. And that's fair. I think that's fair to kind of anybody that when they see something like that. So we had to put out an update which, you know, forced an amend Gooey on it. When you look at Luna, there's never going to be that problem because there's no gas on the network. Every transaction is handled fairly, which I think is great when it comes to trading. When it comes to play to earn gaming and stuff like that, and when it comes to other things which may be very, very dependent on speed of transaction, such as platforms which, say, allow for futures trading and stuff like that, they often would front run the gas price a little bit because you need to be within the first or second block that's going through on it. On Polygon, that first or second block will be, you know, 2 to 4 seconds, which is brilliant. And we just front run it a little bit and we get in on top of that. On Luna, you can't front run it. And if you're waiting, you know, 2 blocks, possibly 3 blocks, you're back into 12 to 18 second territory. And Cost of it, I'm not going to say it's too high, being honest. It's one of the better ones out of all of the L1s and L2s that are out there at the moment. But it's the fact that I can't really, increase it at all. Like, this is the base cost of it. I understand there being a little bit of a higher cost if we're putting through, kind of front running it. But I'm not great on the idea of it if I can't kind of guarantee that I'm going to be in the next block or anything like that. Now, Luna does have really large block sizes, which does help offset against that. So that's something, again, we're going to be looking at over time. Other stuff then, like, Harmony 1, I think Harmony 1 is actually probably going to have a good future ahead of it if it continues developing in the fashion it is right now. And then we have, say Cardano, which I just spoke about. And really, that was one of the biggest letdowns for me all year. The minute I saw the smart contract layer information that was coming out on that, it kind of, well, there's a reason I kind of sold off a lot of my tokens around that time. I mean, we were looking at about 7 transactions per second, which is slower than, I can't actually name a network which is slower than that. The smart contract layer, the fact that it used, that kind of more archaic method of running, like, there's nothing particularly wrong with UTXO, particularly when they have an extended version of it on top of that. But there's a reason we kind of moved away from it, and it's difficult to develop for. Now, I'm not saying that as in people will simply turn away because this is a bit harder to develop for. There's certainly going to be, and there already has been, great kind of ways of working around it. Like, I believe Sunday Swap changed around there. So one of the issues with this is that you can't have multiple transactions on within a block or anything like that. This is a one transaction kind of deal. You send something through, it's one transaction and that's it. So say on Ethereum, you wanted to, buy any token on there. Let's just say it was Dogira. You're interacting with a router, and there's actually multiple steps in that. I mean, you might be buying it with, say, Pax Gold, which we don't have liquidity for. So the steps it would go through is that, it would convert the Pax Gold into whatever is kind of high liquidity on that side. We would assume Ethereum. It would then convert that Ethereum into Dogira, and it would then send the Dogira back onto your wallet. There's multiple different queries that it ran through in that. On Cardano, it can't do anything like that. It has to be one thing at a time. So the workaround that they're running with right now on, I believe it's Sunday Swap that I read technical white paper on, was you have to mint an NFT to kind of save your progress while you're doing it. And then you have multiple different transactions you have to do, from minting the NFT, interacting with the NFT, getting your tokens back, stuff like that. And I mean, right now, to me, particularly when it comes to a play to earn gaming environment, and particularly with how DeFi has evolved over the last few years, it really looks to me as something that the developers did not query the market at all since they began developing. And it really put a bad taste in my mouth, being honest on it. I mean, yes, there are ways we can work around these limitations, such as the NFT minting system and having checkpoints on it. It makes it more expensive and it makes it slower, and it's not solving anything additional. Like, people have said that it's much more secure. No, it's only as secure as the person who has developed it. And that's kind of the God honest truth. Solidity does get grief every now and then for, I mean, any rug pull you've heard of in the last while has more than likely been on an EVM. And that's not really the fault of Solidity, albeit, yes, it could be a bit better in, I suppose there's a lot of ways you can fall down with it. But it comes down to the level of experience of the developer as a large part as well. It's also a very maturing industry. And by that, I mean, we're only starting to mature in it. We have a lot of developers as well who essentially got on board by, looking at the public source code of any coin that's already out there. And that's every coin. I mean, you can look at Dogira's source code right now. It's attached to our audit. It's available on Etherscan, on Polygon Scan, etc. They're copying and pasting those off coins which are not audited, and then they just deploy them. They don't understand the code that's in there. They know how to change the symbol and the name, and that's it. And that leads to either malice on the developer's part, where they know that there are bugs in this coin already, or it may just be a complete mistake, that they don't know that this had exploits in it and somebody else exploited it. And I think it's one of the reasons why anonymity remains very high in crypto right now, that you have deliberate rug pullers and then you have accidental rug pullers who just simply don't know what they're doing. And that's why Solidity is kind of getting a bad rap, and why EVM is getting a bad rap, because they have lowered the entry bar to the level where anybody can get in. Cardano will not escape that problem. Yes, Pascal has a much bigger entry barrier, copying and pasting has no entry barrier. They're still going to be able to launch their own services and tokens on it. And all it takes really is for one thing to pollute the well. I mean, SafeMoon was probably one of the most egregious examples of that. There's been a couple of papers sent out on it now showing that from the reflections on it, there was an exploit where small amounts could be leached off over time. How many coins do we know that are running on SafeMoon source code? I mean, I remember I saw another token, I think it was called Shock, and they just had a small error in the code on it. And I only saw it when somebody else used their contract as a basis and they noticed that they had an inflation problem. They asked me to take a look at it. It was myself and Kit, the original founder of Dogira. We both took a look at it and we just found that essentially they were missing a variable in a function. Now, whether Shock did it deliberately or accidentally, no idea. On the matter of this token, it was, at least in my opinion, accidental. And they just didn't know. They weren't an experienced developer and they launched tokens using that contract because they saw it worked well. But as time went on, they saw an inflationary problem crop up on it. So like there's a lot of reasons why Solidity has kind of opened the barriers to people and opened the floodgates, but it all came with problems at the same time. So sorry, I know I've given nearly a rundown on every network we could possibly launch.
Yeah, it's all good. You were answering the question.
So what I'm getting to from all of that is that all networks tend to have problems right now, and those problems might look completely different in a couple of months or a couple of years' time, and there's a lot coming ahead in it. I think Polygon so far have shown that they continually improve their network. Granted, there is that snafu that happened this week, but overall they've been very transparent, very open, and building, I suppose, they're building towards their own use cases. If I found out tomorrow that there was, another network that might offer faster blockchain times, or, they might have cheaper transaction costs running across it, or, there might even be a chance that it's just a network that is, incentivizing developers to come on board, and we may be able to essentially fund another game or anything like that. It is all absolutely possible. Like, I do think right now we are safely at home under the Ethereum umbrella, being, Ethereum's L2, Polygon. But that can always change in the future. That's the reality. We will move when technology kind of dictates we need to. Like if Polygon didn't see an update in 4 years, then yeah, sure, we're probably going to be moving to something newer at that stage. There may be completely new networks that come out that are completely new in architecture, and we may need to, launch one of our tokens on there. We might bridge over to it, or we might keep all our stuff on Polygon and Ethereum still and just have a game token launch on there. We're always open to looking at that stuff. It's just purely down to where the technology kind of goes over the next couple of years. But right now where we are, well, I do have my eyes on one or two networks that I would love to see us kind of move over to. There's nothing major kind of making us move at the moment. And without a real big need to move, the reality is that we wouldn't. Like moving onto a new chain or launching a token on a new chain it's pretty big, particularly when we've already kind of got issues onboarding people on Polygon. And that's, a pretty popular network where people are just confused as to how to set up MetaMask to work with something that isn't either, the Binance Smart Chain or, Ethereum. So this is all stuff that we're looking at the moment and seeing where can it benefit us. And if there is something that would benefit us by, bridging onto another chain or launching a game on another chain, yeah, certainly we would do it. But for now, you can rest assured that we are quite safely, at least at home, on the Polygon and Ethereum networks, and hopefully that will remain our home.
Thank you for running through all that. Skylar, you had mentioned to me that there was somebody who's requesting to speak to ask a question. We can make time for one or two of those if they're still interested.
Byzantine, I went ahead and added you as a speaker, so go ahead and ask your question. Feel free.
Hey guys, yeah, thanks for having me up. I always love hearing Owen's insights into the various networks. I'm just curious. So, I've looked at a lot of these different networks as well, like Elrond and Solana, and all these leader-based consensus algorithms that have their unique downfalls. I'm curious, Owen, if you've looked into any leaderless based consensus algorithms, and I believe Phantom is leaderless, but you're explaining the issues you encounter with that. Are there any other networks that you're aware of that are leaderless or that you've looked into?
I suppose nearly everything that I kind of have in mind about networks, I think I've just ran through. From looking through stuff like that, honestly, the leaderless kind of collective on it is, it's not greatly something I look into, being blunt on it. It's more just kind of down to the raw kind of power that's coming out of the network. Now, outside of power, I would look at, level of decentralization and stuff like that. But similarly, I mean, I look at Solana, and while I would claim that, that is quite centralized, I would also look at it in a sense of, it's running quite fine as well. It's not so centralized that it's in one dude's basement, stuff like that. But I think for my own, for my own kind of look on it, I would really look at more so just the technical abilities of the network more than anything else at the moment.
Yeah, no, I would love to hear your thoughts on the Hedera Network one day. If you ever have a chance to look into it, I'm not shilling it. I'm just genuinely curious your perspective.
Yeah, no. So I haven't sat down and actually developed on it or anything like that. Obviously, it's a completely different blockchain. It's brand new, and I am excited to see where it will go in the future. I think the kind of the 2020 and 2021 kind of uptrend that we saw in crypto, it wasn't really reflected much in Hedera. I think a lot of it just went to EVMs, mostly because of how easy it was to kind of copy and paste over everything from Uniswap to SushiSwap, etc. And Hedera are obviously doing something quite different. I would have a lot more hope in Hedera Hashgraph than I would have in Cardano. I will say that much. But from, I suppose, a more technical level, I haven't really sat down and begun developing with it. So I will try to give my opinion on that at some point when I do a bit more research on it. Right now, honestly, I wouldn't have researched enough to tell you anything of importance with it, really.
Yeah, I really appreciate that response. Yeah, so I'll be tuning in to your guys' AMAs. So thanks.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
a million, man. Great to speak to you.
I have one more question in the Discord that we can probably answer fairly briefly here. This one's kind of back to Gooeys. Basically, this question is, I've never heard of Gen Zero NFTs having kind of like lower stats than newer generations. Do you think that would impact kind of the hype of release, or like what's the reason for balancing it in like the reverse direction instead of having the origin ones being way more powerful than the newer ones?
Yeah, so my answer on that, honestly, is going to be quite blunt. When you front load it like that and you put the most powerful ones available for, say, put the most powerful ones available on the origin list with it, you've essentially already power capped your game. And there's very little room to maneuver following that point. The design that we have set out for it, I mean, it's not going to make the origin ones useless or anything like that. The Gen Zero ones, I mean, we are hoping to get something at least cosmetic in there to give them a little bit of a pull towards it in the future. But the reality is that when you have the most powerful come out in, whitelisting and pre-sale where people can't get in on it, you essentially just create an artificial price floor for them. And that's fair enough if other tokens, have found success in doing that, and other projects clearly have in their fundraising phases. But for the actual long-term health of the token, I see it as being a little bit more Ponzi, being honest. And that's just kind of the way that I would see, an original power cap come in like that. Like, you want to kind of work towards that stuff. I mean, you've nobody that picked up, say, World of Warcraft or EVE Online. They started out in the most powerful character, most powerful ship in the game. So yeah, it's something that we did mull over for a while. We would like to have something to kind of recognize the Gen Zero holders, but we don't want to place it at a level that, you've beaten the game because you have gotten in on day one or anything like that. And that's just a very honest opinion that I have on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of where we have to grapple with the difference between, a game and an investment. It's a play to earn game, so it needs to be a game still. And I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up when they think about like, oh, well, my first NFT here, it might not be as powerful as my fifth or sixth or seventh, but it's still a game at the end of the day. It's not just, a money mechanism or a money mechanism. And so that's kind of the line we need to steal.
Yeah, I mean, there can be kind of happy mediums in it. I think when it comes to stuff like, perhaps a cosmetic accessory or something like that, or just a sheen on the card, anything at all, or a sheen on the NFT rather, like that's all stuff that I'd be in favor of. But like, to put this in kind of perspective, if you consider Skyrim, this is one of the major issues I've had with Elder Scrolls games as they went on in time. in Skyrim, you can, level up blacksmithing. You could sit there and you can just put out dagger after dagger after dagger, and eventually you'll be able to give yourself, basically the highest level armor in the game. And then whenever you do a dungeon or anything afterwards, whatever you find will never be as good as what you already have. And I hate that. It takes away everything that's meant to be fun about it. Your exploration is never rewarded because you started yourself at the highest level possible. Like I suppose, if you're looking at it from an investment level or stuff like that, and again, like this, it's a P2E game, and there is an expectation that, people will want to see stuff, going up. They want to see being able to make value off it and stuff like that. But the reality is that if somebody was able to get in on pre-sale and they just looked out and they got the best stats in the game, and no GUI will ever be able to match it, no matter how many combinations you go through, like, that person is also going to have a very major advantage and a very major level of control over the ecosystem as well. Like, if they're able to, get the most tokens and get the most items or what have you out of every quest that they go on, every player is immediately at a disadvantage. And no matter how much you play, you would never be able to match that level. Because they have it. Like, they have number one already. When you're putting in stuff that, trends up over time, it both allows people to be able to get in a little bit, get in on a little bit cheaper on, say, lower level GUIs and stuff like that, and also create a level where, players are actually rewarded if they keep playing the game and they're able to actually, continue building on the stuff that they already have. That's there's an actual progression in it. So when it comes to looking at the actual P2E side of it and being able to use it as an investment, we want to be able to reward people who actually play the game, rather than people who just, got onto the whitelist and just got really lucky with the roll of the first 1,000. And that's it. I mean, yes, there's always an element of chance and gains, but I think we're doing ourselves a massive disservice in the game design department if we were to design it that the most powerful stuff will all be finished on day one. So yeah, that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, that's some really good insight into just overall game design, and how you build things to make them last. I think, let me see, there might be one or two more questions here. I know that we're a bit over time, so thank you everybody for sticking with us for more than an hour here. So with loaning GUIs, is there going to be a preset cost? Do players set that cost, or does the game set that cost?
Yeah, so I'm a fairly big fan of player-run economies and stuff like that. I mean, I hate using the old adage, like, the market will handle what the market can handle, or let the free market sort it out, stuff like that. But generally, when it has come to the actual crypto environments and on blockchain and stuff like that, it does tend to work. I mean, you do tend to get people on day one who would be a little bit more gougy. And I think everybody in P2E and on crypto and blockchain know at this stage that day one is normally where things can be very volatile. So we might put, a maximum cap on it just to prevent somebody from taking, a massive amount of power and that, being able to own way too many at the same time. But the reality is, I think the market will handle what it can handle there. I mean, we're designing the economy in a way that essentially, if you're going to get a loan of a GUI for 2 weeks and there is no possible way that you can ever make back, the value of that in tokens or other things, or be able to pick up your own GUI at the end of it, then the market won't be able to handle it. It will be a poor sale. There's no return of value on it. So it's something that I think the market does sort out pretty well by itself, because people simply would not buy something if they, were looking at, if they were looking immediately at seeing a loss on it. So yeah, in my kind of mind on that, I prefer to see player markets kind of sort that out on their own side.
Yeah, I totally agree with that mindset. I think overall we need to be able to trust people who are enjoying the game to help other people enjoy the game. And so I think those trends will iron themselves out. Let's see. I think we can kick it over to Caroline for just a couple minutes if you want to announce our giveaway winners.
You want to go for Caroline?
Yeah, so today for the Lucky Live listeners, we have Pepperjack at Pontoon Captain. We have Safar at ZS177, and we have Alessandro at Shinigami City. I could pronounce that one because I watched Death Note and I know what a Shinigami is. So those are our live listeners for today. And then I'm just going to announce the Gooeys Doodles winners as well, Elijah, if that's okay.
Go for it. Yep.
Yeah, so we had some great submissions, some really questionable ones, but a lot of them made us laugh, and some of them made us smile. They're beautiful, beautiful renditions, and some of them were monsters. But yeah, without further ado, the winners are at Caffeine86, at Exploding Knees 1, and then at Polygon 1. So yeah, some really great stuff, guys. Honorable mention to Caffeine86 with the Etch-a-Sketch GUI. Very impressive stuff. But yeah, so that's it. So 6 more people on the guaranteed whitelist. Yeah, so tune in another 2 weeks' time. We'll have 3 more.
Yeah. I do want to say while we're here and everybody's listening, we are trying to reach our 2nd milestone on our Gooeys Twitter. So if you guys can make sure that you're helping us share or retweet, like, comment on the posts that we're creating for Gooeys so that we can hit that 750 followers so that we can start giving away 5 whitelist spots for that and a free mint. So we got lots of good stuff planned for you guys. Especially with the lead up to the game here. So yeah, thanks for that, Caroline. Owen, was there anything else you wanted to touch on before we close out?
Yeah, I guess first off, well done to everybody who got the whitelist spots, and well done to everybody who has been spreading the word on Gooeys and getting more followers jumping in there. I've also said today on Telegram, it would be great to get some more people in there as well. I think Gooeys will help kind of boost up those numbers a little bit. That when the market is kind of shaky as it is at the moment, it does what it does. It is often better to have a little bit of company in there to be able to, I suppose, keep you a little bit of company. What is it? Misery loves company. But yeah, no, it's always good to kind of have people around in there, people being able to share their ideas. It's always really good to have more people in the Telegram. So it's also kind of put a bit of focus on that one. Hopefully we can get some more people in. And again, hopefully Gooeys will see that go up decently as well. Last thing then is the time for the next AMA. I believe a poll was run and our lovely American audience would prefer if we held it a little bit later. Caroline, do you want to chime in on that and let us know when we'll be doing our next AMA?
Yeah, sure. So the next AMA in 2 weeks' time, which will be our public mint date, the 25th of March. So an overwhelming 72% voted for 8 p.m. So it's a little bit later, but hopefully the European market can still join in. As we said, we are hoping to do more giveaways, more whitelisting, guaranteed whitelisting spots on those AMAs. And yeah, so we're hoping for a higher listener count as well, live listener count. Though the great thing with Twitter Spaces is that thankfully the recording is there straight away, even after we finish. So yeah, we hope everyone can join in, and it'll be 8 p.m. March the 25th.
Slight correction on that, by the way. So we wouldn't be able to give out whitelist spots on that date. We'll be doing the public launch party AMA pretty much on the 25th there. So we might give out something, possibly.
You're so right. You're so right, Skylar. Sorry.
No worries. Stay tuned for that. And
you might look at a couple of free Gooeys might not go too astray in lieu of that.
Yeah, that's what
there you go. So stay tuned for that. But if you want some free Gooeys, and I mean, really go on with any of the AMAs after the fact too, because we're always developing, we're always getting new stuff out. So who knows? Maybe you might miss something if you don't attend. Other than that, Elijah?
No, yeah. Thank you, everybody, for coming out today and chilling with us for a solid hour and almost hour and a half. We hope that we were able to answer most of the questions you had about Gooeys and what we're working on. We are very, very, very excited to be moving into more of the product release window now. And we're definitely going to be excited to hang out with you guys on Public Mint Day. So until then, we'll see you guys on the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it. Thanks a million, everybody, for attending, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.